I wanted to start out by talking about Mary of Magdalene. So she was a woman who was very lost, very far from God. She was demon tormented. She was someone who gambled a lot. She was someone who had a lot of sin in her life, a lot of pain, a lot of traumas in her life. And Jesus came to save her, and in a moment, by calling her by her name and showing her her true identity in Christ, she was able to be saved radically. She then went on to be a disciple of Jesus, and there was a point where she felt a lot of shame. Her past crept back up, and she left the disciples and went right back into sin. It's a really beautiful story about how she returned due to the other disciples coming to help her out. And when she met with Jesus, he forgave her of her sins and said, in paraphrasing, that he just wants your heart. We don't have to do anything for that salvation. He gives us that. He chooses us. By the grace of God, we are saved. And my testimony is very similar to this. Back in my first year of college, I was blessed with an amazing roommate. We got along really well. And I went to Sacramento State, so I stayed nearby to my family. My mom and my sister lived in Davis, California, about 30 minutes from where I was at. They both lived together in an apartment. At this time, my parents were going through a separation. They had a long 8-year divorce, but they weren't fully out of that yet. So there was a lot of grieving, a lot of pain in my family at this time. And I kept getting phone calls from my mom and my sister over and over that something was waking them up, that they couldn't sleep at night, or they felt a presence there that was very unsettling. And so I started going and spending the night. Now at this time in my life, my dad was atheist, my mom was sort of Christian, didn't really talk about it, and I never had heard about Jesus, I'd never heard about religion. So to me, I just believed that there was a creator and people honored and worshiped this creator in different ways, whether it's Buddha, Jesus, or what have you. So this was my belief system at the time. And I started spending the night just comforting my mom, comforting my sister, not really believing much in ghosts, not really believing much in another life, another dimension that we can't see. So as I started to spend the night, I experienced and witnessed things that are quite unexplainable. I first witnessed what my mom had talked about, where I was laying down in the middle of the night. It was about 2 or 3 a.m. and I heard a woman flash over the top of me and sigh right in my ear. Her face was like a picture, and I was in sleep paralysis. I couldn't move, and I heard her sigh just straight into my ear very loudly, and I sat up and I told my mom that I had heard what she heard. So there's other things that continued happening. My sister was terrified. She would not even sleep at night. She would sleep maybe 2 or 3 hours. And as I kept showing up, there was a night where I was at the apartment by myself. There had been many things happening up to this point. And I was just scrolling on my phone. The TV was on very low. My phone, I don't think, had any sound on at the time. And I heard a voice that wasn't my voice. It wasn't from the TV, but I was kind of distracted. And the voice whispered right in my ear. All of my hairs stood up on my body. And it said, I couldn't quite make out everything, but it said, "Psst, girl, psst, here," like that. And it was like very direct, and the last 2 words were very clear. And then I guess it walked away. So I was sitting there and I was like, wow, gosh, that was really strange. I wonder what that was. I was really freaked out, but I also just brushed it off. And all of these instances that I'm talking about, we saw pictures off the wall. My sister saw earrings dangling one by one by one as she was trying to pray. It was very trying and very difficult, but I just continued to brush these things off. So about 2 weeks later, I'm at lunch with my mom, and my sister was about 19 or 20 years old, I want to say, at this time, and she kept spending the night in my mom's bed. And so I asked, and I said, you know, why does Callie keep spending the night in your bed? And she said, well, your sister had a dream that a woman came up to her and told her it's a girl, she's here. As soon as my mom said that, I instantly knew that we had heard the exact same thing. So by this point, I was extremely curious to find out what the heck was going on. I'd never experienced or heard anything like this in my life. So I start to do what any typical person would do, and I start to Google the address that my mom lived at. Now this is a very graphic, kind of disturbing story, so just a little sensory warning here. I started to Google. There was a house that was directly across the street that had been for sale the whole maybe 4 to 5 months that we had lived there. And in this household, there was an elderly couple that lived there, and there was a 14-year-old boy who lived a couple doors down. This 14-year-old boy had unfortunately always dreamt of murdering an elder couple, snuck in the middle of the night and murdered this couple. Well, it turns out as I'm reading the article that this couple was expecting a granddaughter, meaning back to what we originally heard, it's a girl, she's here. She's born into the world, we have a granddaughter. That completely rocked my world. I had this roommate at the time that I was in the dorm rooms with. I went back to her and I said, you know, I'm gonna sound so crazy. I've never heard anything like this in my entire life. So this is what's going on. Immediately, she jumped up with this deer in the headlights look and said, oh my gosh, my parents are pastors and we need to get you to church immediately so that you can take authority over this thing and start praying it off. I had never heard that in my whole life. I was like, what are you talking about? So she really didn't say much else to me. It definitely put the fear of the Lord in me of like, okay, well, you know, this has happened to other people. So what's going on here? I willingly and openly went to church with her, and we went to a Baptist church in Sacramento, downtown Sacramento, and it was like nothing I had ever seen before. People, the choir team was in full choir robes. The pastor, you know, had his handkerchief and pulled it out and wiping his sweat, and it was a very small congregation, but the messages were powerful, and the words that these pastors spoke just like blew my mind. I had never known anything like this. So I start to show up a few Sundays in a row, and I'm getting really curious, I'm getting interested. I'm still with this friend group of people, and I'm enjoying it, but I'm like, okay, I still have to figure this stuff out because I don't even know if God is real or not. In the middle of worship, I decided to put my hands up, close my eyes, and surrender just this much. And I surrendered and I said, God, if you're real, I need you to show me. I have to see something, I have to feel something. I was very driven by my emotions at that time, and I instantly felt God move. And I immediately, after closing my eyes, saw the choir lifted up. They all became angels. They were singing down from heaven, and I saw pure bright white light like I've never seen in my life. And I had just pure love wash over me. I had never experienced any kind of earthly, worldly, relational love like this in my whole life. And I could not even open my eyes. It was so overbearing and so overwhelming. I just started to weep and I crumpled to the floor. And I was like, God, that is you. I want to experience this the rest of my life. Now, I've later heard that God uses nostalgia as a tool to always bring you back to Him, right? So this was my nostalgia moment. I wanted more of this and more of this and more of this. I couldn't get enough. Well, it turns out, like many people also in the Bible that we read about, in the Old Testament, we see that they've experienced and encountered the God, the living God. They've experienced Jesus in angel form. They see these crazy miracles, and yet they still turn away, right? I did that. I did the same exact thing, and I didn't realize that until later down the road. So unfortunately this time, I kind of lost touch with this friend group. I didn't have community, which is one of the biggest points I can make about salvation. I had no example of what to go off of. I had never seen what faith looked like, really walked out. I never read my Bible. I wasn't in true prayer and true relationship. So I kind of just let a little bit of sin into my life, and I started really partying as well. I went into my first club, and I just was like a deer in the headlights. I saw the shiny bright lights, and I kind of took off into that, right? And I got quite lost. I went right back into the world, and in my mind, because I had never understood what any of the Bible said or any of what God says to us, I thought to myself, well, I'm saved, so I'm okay, I'm gonna be fine, I can go do whatever I want, and I'm gonna go to heaven. Unfortunately, that's not true. That's a whole other video we can do. But I did start to party, and I started to meet different friend groups and really heavily just get involved in the college lifestyle. I started making really poor choices with dating, especially. I started to recreate the same cycles over and over. I started to use men and in turn use myself, use my body as a weapon. I started to use my emotions as a weapon. And I was dating this man at the time who was extremely toxic for me. He very much resembled my dad in a lot of ways, and I really wanted him to want me. I wanted him to see me, but I did it in a way where I never showed my emotion. I, quite frankly, killed a part of my soul off just to have the validation of this man. At the same time, my parents were in separation, trying to still get to a conclusion of their divorce, and it came out after a really long story and long saga that my dad had been unfaithful several times. When I took this information back to the guy I was dating, it did not go over well. He ended up ghosting me for well over a month and a half. I didn't hear a word from him. I blew up his phone. My abandonment just went through the roof. I also did not have a relationship with my dad at that point. Things had been severed and cut off, even after we tried to reconcile many times. And I was left quite alone. I was left in my depression. I was left in abandonment. I was left in anger and frustration. I had no answers. I had no conclusions. And I can even remember laying in my bed one day and the sun was rising very early in the morning. I'd cried myself to sleep. I'd cried myself waking up, and I saw this beautiful sunrise and it was coming through my window, and I hated it. I despised anything that was good. I despised any creation that was God's. I didn't even understand that's what was happening at that time. And I wanted to ruin people. I wanted to ruin men. I had a vengeance out for every man after that. I used and abused them. I used and abused myself, first and foremost, at the end of the day. And I just got in this horrible pattern of self-destruction, thinking that, you know, I was doing justice. I was getting justice back for women and all those men that had hurt me and hurt other women, and I'm standing up for them. That wasn't the case at all. I had a Jesus-sized hole in my heart that nobody could fill, and I tried stuffing alcohol, and I tried stuffing partying, and I tried stuffing men in there. It did not work. I was desperate. So fast forward, during my party days, I was extremely toxic at this point. It went on for many, many, many years. I was definitely depressed at many times. I was just kind of numbing the pain, drinking away, dancing the night away in pain, wasting my life away in pain. And so I was single for 6 years by choice. I had very toxic relationships, and then I started to kind of ruin even my friendships in that season. I started to turn against my friends and get in arguments and black out and all this stuff. And one day I do thank God for this moment, because I had one of my best friends at the time pull me aside and say, "Megan, you are a wreck. Nobody wants to be around you. Nobody likes hanging out with you. You're screaming at people. You're using yourself. I can't be around you." And that was my wake-up call for this go-round. I started doing a lot of self-development, a lot of self-help. I started watching YouTube videos. I started journaling, and I started to kind of come out of this toxicity, but it still lingered there a little in the background. But for the most part, I could at least have my head above water. I could at least have a relationship with people. So I started to meet good men, but I just had such a block and I had such a wall up emotionally. I had trained myself like a military person trains themselves mentally for war. That's how I felt. I felt like I was coming out of war, and I had PTSD, and I was so walled off and so blocked off that even when I met these amazing, wonderful men, I used and abused them, and I threw them to the side. I wouldn't even cry after my breakups, and these men would be devastated thinking that they're gonna marry me one day. Oh, can't imagine. So sorry. Please forgive me. So I was able to finally kind of just get in a place of resting in myself, and I was really reliant on myself and the things that were going on in my life. And I got to this point where I started making good money, and I started hanging out with a different friend group, and I really kind of started to get back on my feet again, right? And I was like, I'm ready. I'm ready for marriage or whatever have you. Well, actually, I didn't ever think I was going to get married. I never thought I was going to have kids. I always said I was never going to. But I got to a point where I was like, okay, I'm thinking about this. This marriage thing doesn't sound too bad. I'd seen a couple good ones and a couple bad ones. So I was like, okay, it's just the luck of the draw. Just pick really well. So I went on and I started dating someone else. After that, I met him in February of 2022. We met on a plane and we did really click and really hit it off right away. There was a lot of things that were very aligned, and I really saw this like other side of life that I had never experienced. We traveled a lot. We had a huge friend group, massive friend group. Really, we were like super heavy into our passions, and I was just really excited to live this life. So as that kind of went on, the problems started happening again. And a lot of the problems that happened were partly me. I can definitely take some responsibility there. But a lot of the other issues that went on were things like alcoholism, family traumas, childhood traumas, and those in this person had not been healed yet. And as we know, you can't have a relationship with someone who is unhealed, or if you do, it's going to be extremely difficult, nearly impossible. So as that year went on, I found out a lot of things about this person that we were definitely not compatible. No one was compatible at this point with this person, and they were just not ready for anything serious at all whatsoever. The way that it ended is he didn't come home one day, and we had a puppy together. We were practically living together. I was very highly invested in this person, and they just never came home. So I decided to pack all my things. I've been here before and we won't be doing this again. Thank you, sir. So I packed all of my things. I went on my merry way. After that, went into yet again another depression. I could not shower myself. I could not brush my hair. I could not even muster up the energy to eat or drink. I barely sustained. I lost about 10 pounds. And I went through about 2 months of this where I was in mental jail. I was in torment. I could not function whatsoever. Enter in a Jesus-sized hole. I was really searching for happiness. As we know, happiness is forever fleeting, and what we really need is joy. Joy of the Lord is my strength. I didn't know this yet. I'm sitting in a chair. I'm getting my hair done by one of my great friends, Bree. I really hope she joins this podcast one day. And she was just radiant and glowing. She had radically changed her life. She was out of a long, toxic 8-year relationship. She was on the brink of being engaged. She had opened a new salon with her friend, and she truly just had this like complete aura about her where she was not the same person I had known the last 4 years. And I'm just sitting there and I'm looking at her, and I had like barely gotten out of bed. I'm like, just help me, just fix something about this wreck that I'm going through. And I'm looking at her going, holy smokes. This girl has something about her. What changed? What is her secret? I want that. And now on the other side, I know it was the Holy Spirit. At that time, I had no idea. So I asked her and I said, Bria, I said, I've been going through a really hard time. I just got out of a really bad relationship, and your life is going so well. What changed? And she said that she was going to a church here in San Diego. Now, when I moved to San Diego back in December 2019, I had started going to this church as well. I was definitely 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I would show up to the message, it would be great, and then I would go live my life afterwards. It didn't really resonate. I had left the church during COVID, and this was my call to action to come back. As soon as she said that, I knew that there was a higher being calling me back to be in the presence of Him. So I did. I answered that call, and I started going back to this church. Now this time, I was desperate, right? I had tried so many different things. I had tried church. I had tried, the party lifestyle. None of that had worked for me. So when I went back to church this time, I said, okay, I'm doing something different. I actually am going to trust God. I'm going to put my life into God's hands and give it up. I need to give it up. All my ways, all my thought patterns, all the words I'm speaking, I need to give it up. I don't resonate with that. I don't have any fruit from that in my life right now. And again, as I'm in worship, all these years later, I put my hands up and I say, God, take it. take everything that is rotting my life, that is rotting my soul right now, and take it away. I can't do this anymore. I've tried to do it my way, and this time I'm doing it your way, because I've noticed and I've learned that's the only way you can do things is God's way. And I did, and I wept, and I just completely released all this baggage in me from years. I had someone, sweetest person, thank you, Hannah Bolden. She came over and she started praying for me during worship. I don't even think she knows that story. And she started praying for me during worship, and I was a new person. I had just something shift in my soul, in my heart. And I wanted to be aligned with God, and I wanted more of his presence, and I wanted to know what it was like to be his daughter, to be loved by somebody. I wanted to know what it was like to experience joy of the Lord. I didn't have that up until that point. And so I really just started putting my life in God's hands, and especially when it came to dating. And I said, God, I am ready for whoever you send me, but I don't want to pick anymore. You have to do this. I can't do this. And not only that, but I want your will so badly over mine that I don't care if you want me to be single the rest of my life. If that is your will, I truly accept it. And I continue to fall back on this over and over and over in my head. And I started to walk that out and practice that. Every time I would be like, oh, I'm lonely, or I need a man, or I need marriage, I go back to that and I say, you know what, God, this is in your hands, and I will do your will. It is not what I want anymore. And it truly radically changed my life. So fast forward a few months, I'm showing up to church. I am swiping on Bumble. I was really close to coming off of the app. I just wasn't really interested in anything going on there. And I was thinking, oh, I'm going to have to be single another 6-7 years, and I'll have to search around and find somebody, and it's not going to be on Bumble. So I had this kind of almost pessimistic viewpoint on Bumble at the time. And I remember specifically swiping on Patrick's profile. Now, Patrick had 3 photos all from the same weekend. No prompts, no words, nothing like that. And I was sitting there and I was going, I don't know. And I was like, you know what, why not? Give it a chance. So I ended up swiping. He asked for a phone call shortly after. I completely blew him off, and he followed up a second time. He was highly pursuant of me, and we had a long conversation on the phone that following week, and we talked for about 2.5 hours. Now, I had never had a conversation like that in my entire life, and our first date was at church. He actually ended up being at the same church as I was. And we just never ran into each other. The timing was not right. God was not ready. I was not surrendered. And this time the timing just had aligned perfectly. So our first date was at church, and he shows me his phone, and he had taken notes from our first conversation. And he had my sister's names, my cat's name, all the different things. And I was really blown away. I was really surprised. And I walked away from that date, and I called my mom and I said, I think I just met my future husband. Which had never been anything she's heard in her life. And she didn't even question me at all. It was really interesting. She just gets on the phone and she goes, really? I'm so excited for you. You go, Mom. That's the way to be supportive. So fast forward, we're dating. We are somewhat in discipleship. We kind of haven't really seen this whole religious relationship walked out. And we were not dating biblically to start with. We were spending the night, we were having intercourse, lots of different things. And as time went on, we were in discipleship. We started really reading our Bible, and we started to do the Restore program at our church. It's essentially a 12-step program that walks through childhood traumas, things that we have unbelief in God about, or just skewed views of the world. And it really goes into all these different points and really digs out kind of the junk, if you will. It's an incredible program, truly life-changing. And I really began to see what it was like to be in relationship with God and really truly speaking to God on a daily basis. And so did Patrick. And he really became a leader in that. He really became a leader at the church. And we decided to go celibate. We also later decided to stop spending the night even. And it was extremely difficult. But I have to say it was the best decision I've ever made, besides 1, following Christ, and 2, swiping yes on his profile. I can definitely go into a longer topic on this. I know I have so many questions from girls about this, and I want to be transparent, I want to be open, and I really want these testimonies on this channel to impact you, to really move your heart, and have no judgment behind that. Truly just champion you guys and push you into the correct direction, into your fullest, highest self in Christ that I know you can be. So all of that said, we went through this crazy roller coaster of a journey. We got married in July of 2024, so just a short year of meeting one another. We are married, we have an amazing apartment, we have an amazing life. Thank you and glory to God. We have an amazing relationship and friends in our circle. A lot of these friends I really want to introduce you guys to so that you guys can also hear testimonies like this one. You can really be moved and in relationship with God and just moving towards the glorious life that awaits you on the other side. So I hope this really impacted you. I really hope that it just pressed on your heart to get closer to God. And thanks so much for watching. Stay tuned for our clothing drop September 30th. Mwah!